You need to have a way of evaluating, whether that means you get more old school guys in the building for these positions, but you have to find a way to better evaluate those players, and you have to find a way to figure out which one of them players, like how many of them players like to fight. And I'm not saying fight on the field, right? Like, I'm not saying start a brawl on the field. I don't know if people are going to interpret it like that. But what I am absolutely saying is, hey, man, people got to like contact, like love contact, in order to play those positions for a long time in the NFL. And what we have seen is that flaw has trickled into so many problems for the Cleveland Browns, right? Because since we can't find starting quality defensive line play from the draft, even though we drafted guys, we keep having to sign one-year patch guys along the defensive line, right? Jadeveon Clowney. Even though I think Alex Wright might step up and be all right. But Malik McDowell, all the Taven Bryant this year. Before that, it was Sheldon Richardson on the last year of his deal. It's been 1 year, Malik Jackson, 1 year deal along that defensive line. There's been no continuity on that defensive line. Could you imagine trying to patch up an offensive line in this same exact manner? And what gives me hope? One of the benefits, I think, of the Cleveland Browns having this weird period, right, before having their franchise quarterback, or the guy that they are paying to be the franchise quarterback, walk in December, but having 11 games to play before that. And it is a weird, so I'm going to backtrack. Can we talk about how weird of a situation this is that the Cleveland Browns are in? This is unprecedented, right, that a team has traded for somebody to basically change the franchise, be the franchise quarterback. But, like, we got to wait 11 games. You know what I mean? And we know why we got to wait the 11 games. I'm not here to argue about that. But it is a weird situation, but it's a situation that the Browns could use to their benefit in the long term. Now, clearly, in the short term, it doesn't look like they're going to really benefit anything from this, right? Maybe Nick Chubb gets closer to a rushing title because he's getting more carries than he usually does. Maybe stuff like that happens because of this. But win-loss record wise, it was never going to benefit you for Deshaun Watson not to be out there. But where it can benefit you is evaluations, right? And what this has done is made some evaluations very clear. Now, I'm going to start this off by saying none of the changes I'm going to suggest are head coaching changes. Kevin is a good enough offensive mind that you have to stick with the ups and downs as a coach. And does he have ups and downs? Absolutely, right? He has weird challenges. Sometimes his decision making seems like he's overthinking things. These are things that happen, but I think he's a offensive mind that you really need to covet, and you got to stick through the flaws with that until they can start to get to the other side. You know, the Chiefs and the Eagles and Andy Reid, all of these, Kyle Shanahan, these are guys that are worth keeping just for their offensive prowess alone. And Kevin's no different. And I think he's going to become of that tier, because if you look at the quarterbacks that Kevin has influenced as an offensive coordinator, there has always been a sharp increase. You look at Kirk Cousins, sharp increase those 2 years that he was with Kevin Stefanski in his play. You look at Baker Mayfield, he had the best season of his career. He had a torn labrum last year, and he was still better last year with the Browns than he is healthy with the Carolina Panthers right now. With the better wide receiving core, I would argue, too. DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson probably better than, like, no Odell Beckham and whatever was left of Jarvis Landry when he was clearly unmotivated to play for this team. Like, it has been, and even with Jacoby Brissett, look, he has not been a great quarterback, but the fact that we're even talking about Jacoby Brissett being, whether he's starting, like, he has played above expectation, I guess is my point about that. So everywhere we've gone, the quarterbacks have been better, and it's Kevin Stefanski that's there. So that tells you that you have something in him. So he is not one of the things that I want to change. But I do think there is some adjustments that are going to be needed for this team to reach its potential in the upcoming Deshaun Watson era. Because while some of these flaws that we saw would not be anything that would prevent the Browns from winning games if Deshaun Watson were here, right? If Deshaun Watson were playing in these games, the Browns would be like 5-2, probably more than likely, maybe even 6-1. Like they would be a really good team with a really good record. But since they don't have Deshaun, certain flaws are costing them very close games. And when we look at the Browns' schedule, they've really only had one big loss to the New England Patriots, but every other loss has been within a small margin. And what's costing you at these margins? These small things that they can adjust. And if they fine-tune these things and then they have Deshaun Watson, next year could be a really good year for this team. So that's why I want to focus on. Obviously, there's still stuff to glean out of this year, but I wanted to, since there's an extra day in the schedule until Monday Night Football, because the Browns do play on Monday, I wanted to take the extra day to kind of do some long-form retrospective kind of looking. So long-form retrospective. What was that? Just long form. I'm going to keep that in video, by the way, but just long form thinking about this team. But one of the things I think need to be adjusted is the drafting philosophy on defense. One of the issues I have had with the Andrew Berry philosophy when it comes to defensive players has been these extreme guardrails that I don't find very useful for finding good players in the long run, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Now, when I say guardrails, what I'm referring to is Andrew Berry seems to have a template of players that he likes to go at when it comes to relative athletic score. RAS is something you'll hear during draft time. When it comes to certain performances and certain drills, and when it comes to age, right? These are things that Andrew Berry covets, especially in those first 4 rounds of an NFL draft, and that if the player doesn't fit in those guardrails, he's less likely to take a chance on drafting that player. Not saying that he won't ever reach outside the guardrails. He has done it before, but he's less likely to do so. And I think those things need to be adjusted, especially along the line of scrimmage. Look, we can point to a lot of spots on this roster where Andrew Berry has done a great job. Bringing in Amari Cooper for a 5th-round pick. Great job. Upgrading the quarterback position and moving on from Baker Mayfield and not extending him, given what we've seen of him in Carolina. Great job. Offensive line. He built a pretty damn good offensive line, extended all those guys, have those guys long term, extending David Njoku. That's a great decision. On the other side, I still think JOK is going to work out because he's had a couple good games in a row, and he had a really good season last year, so I think that's going to be fine. Greg Newsome is a good pick. Martin Emerson is a good pick. For the most part, I mean, like even a guy like Grant Delpit, who's up and down, he's still fine most of the time. And then John Johnson has been a bit of a disappointment, but that's that, right? But it really starts to get iffy, and the only place where I have issues with his moves are in that front 7. And that's not a surprise to me. And the reason that's not a surprise to me is the philosophy. And the philosophy, I think, is something that works for wide receivers. It works for skill positions. It might even work for free agents. But I really, really, really don't think it works as a viable draft solution or strategy for front 7 players. Because, we make a lot of jokes about it. You need a dog in you and everything else. But a lot of being in that box, in that front 7, most show snaps, is about your will to fight, right? It's about how much do you like to fight. When you are on the defensive line, that is a fight every snap, every play. How much do you like to fight? Linebackers, that is a fight every play. When a team wants to run the ball down your throat, you are crashing and bashing with guards as a linebacker. Somebody who probably has 60, 70. How much do you like to fight? And analytics has no gauge on how much somebody like. There's no way for analytics to tell you how much fight does a player have. And I know it sounds old school and it sounds like one of those eye test things, but these are things that are relatively easy to evaluate in things like the Senior Bowl and in things like tape, right? Where you can see the veracity of a player. Or maybe it might even be how do you motivate somebody to do that. But I think that's something you got to have in you. You can't get it coached in you, especially once you hit like an adult age. But that's one of those things, right, that analytics is going to miss. And it's no surprise to me. The more finesse positions, we're good at that. We be drafting good players in the 6th round with the finesse positions. We getting undrafted dudes. Andrew Berry's cold at that. It's that front 7, right, where those guardrails need to be adjusted. You need to have a way of evaluating, whether that means you get more old school guys in the building for these positions, but you have to find a way to better evaluate those players, and you have to find a way to figure out which one of them players, like how many of them players like to fight. And I'm not saying fight on the field. Right, like I'm not saying start a brawl on the field. I don't know if people are going to interpret it like that. But what I am absolutely saying is, hey man, people got to like contact, like love contact, in order to play those positions for a long time in the NFL. And what we have seen is that flaw has trickled into so many problems for the Cleveland Browns, right? Because since we can't find starting quality defensive line play from the draft, even though we've drafted guys, we keep having to sign one-year patch guys along the defensive line, right? Jadeveon Clowney. Even though I think Alex Wright might step up and be all right. But Malik McDowell, all the Taven Bryant this year. Before that, it was Sheldon Richardson on the last year of his deal. It's been 1 year, Malik Jackson, 1 year deal along that defensive line. There's been no continuity on that defensive line. Could you imagine trying to patch up an offensive line in this same exact manner? And what gives me hope is that they figured this out with Bill Callahan, how to find guys who like to fight on the offensive side of the ball, because they have drafted good offensive linemen and they have developed good offensive linemen over there. Now they need to figure out what do they need on that defensive side of the ball. And this is going to lead into my next thing that I think would help the team, is I think they need a new defensive line coach. Hey, man, no beef with Chris Kiffin, but like we need somebody to be better at that position. And it's not necessarily that I think Chris Kiffin is bad. I think it's that Chris Kiffin is a good defensive line coach for probably like 15 to 20 teams out there. He's a good coach. I'm not saying he's a bad coach, but the Browns need a great coach in that position. They need somebody a bit more qualified, because what they're going to ask out of a defensive line coach is going to be similar to what they're asking out of Bill Callahan, the offensive line coach, is, hey, we need you to be able to do a little bit more than just like coach these dudes. We need you to find guys, develop guys, and do that. And for a guy to do that, I think you need a more experienced guy than Chris Kiffin. I just do. I think you need somebody with an NFL background, somebody who's been in the league for a minute, somebody who's been coaching these defensive linemen. Like if I had to upgrade coaching positions, and I've already gone through this before, I would get rid of the special teams coach. I would get rid of Joe Woods. I would probably get rid of Chris Kiffin too. And if you get rid of Joe Woods, you're getting rid of Chris Kiffin and everybody else. So that should be a point of emphasis. Make sure that whenever you get the new bunch of coaches, get a really good defensive line coach that you trust. You know what I mean? Because you need to develop it, right? The reason the offensive side of the ball doesn't have these problems with positions that are fight-worthy, right? Running back and offensive line. We got Stump Mitchell. We got Bill Callahan. You got two great coaches in that position to help you supplement your analytics with in-house knowledge, We don't have that same thing on the defensive side of the ball with the linebacking coach and with, well, the linebacking coach, I think he's all right. So let me get off of him. But it's mainly Chris Kiffin, right? Like the failure has been in the interior of this defensive line. I think nobody's going to debate me on that. So that is where you can make some improvements. And like, I know we're 2-5 and it sucks and it's miserable right now. And it is hard to see next year or the year after, or even the thought of hearing next year makes your stomach hurt. And I get that. But also understand that this is a team that is a quarterback away from being a playoff contender. And the quarterback is literally on his way. And they could be a couple of bodies in the defensive line away from being a Super Bowl contender. This team is very close. They are very close. They need a couple of key pieces, one that's already on their way and one that an easy adjustment can get you there, but they need to make some adjustments. They need to make some changes. And that's why I would say, look, it's not a great situation to be in waiting for your franchise quarterback, but if you're going to be in this situation, make the most out of it and make the most out of the evaluations that popped up when that dude wasn't here. And make some decisions based on that, because that's how you're going to make sure that this team isn't just a good team that Deshaun Watson makes great. You want a great team that Deshaun Watson makes elite. Right now, we're a decent team to mediocre team that Deshaun's probably going to make pretty good. That's what we are right now. We need to make sure that we're better than that. Now the flaws are clear as day. We see where we're going to get cost games from. We see what mistakes can be made that are going to cost us games on the margin. Now we got a chance to fix it. That's the best thing to come out of this whole thing. I know it sucks. You know it sucks. But we can still make lemon out of lemonade. That's my thoughts, y'all. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.